Hello everybody and welcome back to this series on The Tempest. Everything I go through in this video comes from Mr. Bruff's Guide to The Tempest, co-written with Kerry Lewis. This is a fantastic guide now available in paperback on Amazon. You get the complete original text, a line-by-line translation into modern English and detailed analysis as well. So do head over to Amazon and pick up a copy in paperback. So in today's video we're going to talk about Act 2, Scene 2. Now, if you think about it, in Act 1, the audience learns about Prospero's reasons for wanting justice and the return of his dukedom. At the beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, we're going to learn about justice and injustice from the point of view of Caliban, a very different character. Caliban utters some of the best poetry in the play, and in this scene we'll explore why Shakespeare places such beautifully crafted language into the mouth of what the other characters see as nothing more than a monster. So Caliban opens the scene with a soliloquy in which he curses Prospero and describes the torments he's endured. Literally meaning solo speech, a soliloquy is a monologue spoken by a character who assumes that he or she is alone on stage. Hence it provides the audience with direct insight into what the character is thinking and feeling. So in Caliban's soliloquy we learn more about the relationship between the colonizer Prospero and Caliban, the colonized. So using a range of devices, Caliban expresses his defiance and his willingness to cry out against injustice. All the infections that the sun sucks up from bogs, fens, flats on Prosper fall. So the alliteration and assonance with sun sucks up create a hissing sound like an angry snake, and this is developed with the triple alliteration on the next line, which develops the intensity of Caliban's cursing. These devices make the audience wonder at the perception of Caliban as a savage if he can manipulate language in such a sophisticated manner. This idea is developed throughout this speech, and we see his choice and placement of words in blank verse. Caliban knows Ariel is listening, but he still speaks out. Sorry, you can't see that very well on the screen, where he says, "And yet I needs must curse." The monosyllabic line and the double stress, the spondee on must cursed, before the caesura, the full stop, focuses the attention of the audience on the angry hissing sibilance of must curse. This illustrates he's unable to contain his feelings and demonstrates that unlike Ariel, his body might be enslaved, but his spirit will not be controlled. We also see in Caliban's soliloquy the oppressive effects of colonialism, with the Shakespeare's use of a list to describe the tortures that Caliban has endured. Like apes that mow and chatter at me, and after bite me, then like hedgehogs which lie tumbling in my barefoot way, and mount their pricks at my footfall, sometime am I all wound with adders, who with cloven tongues do hiss me into madness. So, lots going on here, and you can see from the highlighting, Shakespeare doesn't just make a point by choosing to do one thing. He uses lots and lots of different techniques in the same speech to really back up his ideas. The consonance of the harsh, spitting t sound evokes feelings of pain, thereby developing Caliban's anger and frustration. We see subtlety with the fall of the spoken intonation of lie tumbling in my barefoot way. The spondee, lie tum, emphasizes that the hedgehogs have malicious intent as they're waiting to prick his bare feet. The regular rhythm of the rest of the line creates a sense of inevitability. Caliban cannot stop the magic. The fall in spoken intonation that culminates with the downwards cadence or sound of way is not crafting that an audience would expect of a savage. This is too beautiful, too eloquent for what the audience would expect this savage to speak like. The inverted word order with am I instead of I am, with the I hanging on the end of the line, also emphasizes Caliban's identity, which he refuses to relinquish. The consonance in the final line again replicates the hissing of a snake, underlying his defiance. All of these techniques combine to illustrate that, contrary to what Prospero says, Caliban, through his skillful crafting of language, is not a savage, and this makes the audience, of course, feel sympathy for the character. Caliban's use of blank verse develops the idea that he is a noble savage and the supplanted king of the island. His use of nature imagery develops this idea, and it changes as the soliloquy progresses. First, there are references to geographical or topographical features, bogs, fens, flats, which Caliban uses to curse Prospero with great articulation and sophistication. In the second half of the speech, we see animals, such as hedgehogs and adders, which would be well known to Shakespeare's audience, and the onomatopoeic reference to the chatter of apes would have been understood, as apes were a relatively common entertainment in Elizabethan England, mentioned by Ben Jonson, among others. Through the list of tortures linked to animals, we see that Caliban is physically and emotionally wounded by nature being turned against him. Caliban is aligned with nature, so the fact that he's been alienated from his environment must be deeply wounding, and once more the audience is encouraged to pity him. Now, in Shakespeare's plays, prose was generally regarded as suitable for comic or low-status characters, while verse was retained for those of high status. Prose is easy to identify because each line runs continuously from margin to margin, like paragraphs in a novel. The comic characters, Stephano, the drunken butler who sings about prostitutes and STDs, Trinculo, the jester, both speak in prose. These two characters are further examples of the negative effects of colonialism, with each representing the very worst that so-called civilized societies can offer. By juxtaposing their prose with the beautiful blank verse of Caliban's Soliloquy, Shakespeare is inviting the audience to consider who the civilized people really are. Stephano and Trinculo represent drunkenness and buffoonery, and in conjunction with Caliban, whom they consider a monster, they are stock characters of an anti-masque, which introduces comic or grotesque characters and plot material to act as foils to the plot of the main masque. We would expect the characters of an anti-masque to look monstrous, like Caliban, or to be wearing unusual costumes, like Trinculo the jester. And this anti-masque precedes Act 3, Scene 1, when Ferdinand and Miranda will express the purity of their love. Stephano, Trinculo, and Caliban serve to heighten the contrast between their low comedy and the high romance of Ferdinand and Miranda. The low comedy occurs when Caliban and Trinculo, hiding under a cloak, appear to the drunken Stephano to be a creature with 4 legs and 2 mouths, one at either end. And Shakespeare further develops the comedy in the themes of appearance and reality when Caliban mistakes Stephano for a god, and once again when Stephano gives him a bottle, telling Caliban to kiss it to pledge his loyalty. This is a profane parallel to the swearing of oaths of allegiance on the Bible, and these elements combine to create comedy as Caliban becomes ever drunker and starts to sing tunelessly. Sometimes Shakespeare allows characters to switch between prose and blank verse depending on who they're speaking to and what they're speaking about. Caliban shifts to prose, which is appropriate to ordinary people, when he speaks to Trinculo and Stephano, who of course are of low status. And this heightens the comedy when he mistakes Trinculo for a god. The audience is encouraged to laugh at Caliban's naivety and his drunkenness, and Shakespeare's borrowing for his own dramatic purposes the contemporary theory that indigenous people were unable to control the effects of alcohol. Some colonists in South America and Virginia used alcohol to control the natives. So note that it is Stephano who corrupts Caliban into drunkenness in the first place, so the blame for Caliban's drunkenness could be said to lie firmly with the butler. The theme of the relationship between the colonizers and the colonized continues when Trinculo's immediate response to meeting Caliban is how we can take him to Europe and make money by exhibiting him at a freak show. And this foreshadows the educated Antonio's remarks upon how marketable Caliban is when he sees him for the first time in Act 5. In Shakespeare's time in London, some Native Americans were exploited in this way, and unacceptable as it may seem today, when they died, their bodies were left on display. No one at the time appeared to have questioned the right of Europeans to colonize and exploit the indigenous people, and from the characters' comments we see that they could be exploited by all classes of society. I'm going to leave the video there, but there is another 5 or 6 paragraphs of analysis of this scene in the revision guide, so please do pick up a copy and subscribe to the channel.